setting up. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. My name is Michael Haynes, SME Business Growth Specialist and founder of the consulting firm Listen, Innovate, Grow. And joining me today for our discussion is the brilliant and lovely Vivian Michael, the founder of the Michael Law Group. Vivian, how are you this afternoon?
I am brilliant. Thanks for putting this together, Michael. It's great to be with you.
My pleasure. And so for those of you as you're joining on, please say hello in the chat and say hello and where you're from. And so today in this discussion, in the next 30 minutes or so, Vivian and I are going to be talking around 3 key trends that small and medium-sized businesses really need to be aware of as we're entering into 2022. Don't really know where 2021 has gone. It's been a crazy fast year, but there are 3 key trends for 2022 that small and medium businesses need to be mindful of. The 3 key trends we're going to be talking about today are going to be around acquiring and retaining talent. We're going to be talking around collaborating and the different ways, strategic collaborations that small and medium businesses can undertake. And then we're going to be talking about automation and systemization. Now, in terms of our discussion, me coming from the business side of things, I'm going to be giving all of you some insights and perspectives of what to be thinking about these trends from a business perspective. Vivian will be talking and enlightening us as to some of the legal implications with regards to how do we utilize and respond to these trends. So, Vivian, if we kick off, we're talking about, talent retention and acquisition. And so as we're heading into 2022, there's lots of talk we're all seeing about the Great Resignation. And while that is happening, and I think to a large degree, I would argue that's happening from very much a lot of your big, large corporate organizations. For us as small and medium-sized businesses, really, this is a time now where a lot of small and medium-sized businesses are really looking forward as to how they can grow, scale, take their businesses to the next level. There are many people who are doing the Great Resignation from those big corporate jobs from their previous lives that are going to be looking to set up businesses, and they're going to needing to be acquiring and keeping good talent. And that's really been something that is a key challenge for a lot of organizations and small and medium-sized businesses in particular. So to kind of kick things off, in terms of some of the ideas and some of the things that I think small and medium businesses should be considering as part of how can they acquire those skills, those people that they need, a couple of things. One, considering hiring the kinds of staff and people that you need from other locations. I was just talking to a professional service firm that works very much in the insurance space, and the MD, she's going to be hiring people from overseas because there's just not this pool of talent in terms of the kinds of skills and experience that she needs, that she's actually going, beyond our international borders. She's going beyond our domestic borders to recruit. So that's something I think for those of you who are involved in very complex technical areas, require special solutions and skills, to be mindful and open to going beyond your home borders in sourcing talent. I think another area which I think for small, medium businesses that they really should be considering and tapping into is the whole notion of the gig economy, freelancers, independent consultants, contractors. There are a lot of them out there already with lots of great skills and experience. I suspect once we flip over into the new year, there'll be a lot more as a result of this Great Resignation. But there's a lot of them that you can access through various online platforms, such as the likes of Upwork.com. There's specialty organizations, especially online channels such as Expert 360, which has contractor, interim consultants, marketers, analysts, etc. So accessing that whole gig economy, I think, is a very useful place to be tapping into. Recruitment firms as well often specialize in the whole contractor space, so that often can be a source where people can go to with respect to trying to find the talent they need. And now even some of the larger online recruiting platforms, for example, the likes of Indeed.com, now has a whole division specialized in working with small, medium businesses. So tapping into that gig economy network of freelancers and contractors is another area. I think another area that I think many business owners overlook rather is hiring interns, and that could be through universities, high schools, TAFEs, or community colleges. Lots of people there with a lot of great skills, experience, eager to work hard, eager to learn, where you can, take advantage of those skills for either, low fees, no fees in exchange for credit, as a means of fulfilling some of the people elements needed within our small medium businesses that they need to get those skills and processes and areas done. I think also as well, Vivian, as well, in addition to where to hire, I think we've got to be mindful of, really trying to make it attractive to really bring in the kinds of people that we want. So really thinking out of the box in terms of how to entice some of the people that we're looking for in terms of, you might think of potentially some kind of signing bonus. Are there some kind of perks you can provide in terms of, transit subsidies, memberships to gyms, other kinds of things such as that, that we really want to be mindful of. And I also think as well, the speed in which we're hiring, I think is very important in terms of the whole selection process. Because often that is something, typically when you're dealing with a lot of larger organizations, it can be kind of drawn out. And I think given all that's what's happening, given the amount of opportunities and the amount of job vacancies that are available, if you are going to want to get those skills and people in, you're going to have to act and move fast. So doing virtual interviews, using the likes of screener questions to really kind of weed out and find out, okay, who really should you be focusing in on are some of the things that I think are going to be very important. So Vivian, would love to get your perspective with from some of the legal implications that I think people need to be thinking about in terms of hiring. I think one of the big questions often comes up, because one of the big sources of talent is going to be accessing those freelancers, those independent contractors. What are some of the things that people need to be mindful of when you're looking to bring in contractors versus employees? And perhaps, Vivian, if you also could enlighten us, what are some of the watch-outs and where does it become gray, particularly when someone gets on a very longer term engagement? And so it's, we're going from just the 3 to 4 months, but we're getting into 7, 8, 9 months, a year plus. Can you help us delineate what we have to be mindful and watch out for, and where things become gray between the independent contractor and the full-time employee?
Yeah, absolutely. So the contractors are a really, really flexible way of bringing them into the business and having them help out. But you have to be really careful that you are in fact classifying them correctly as a contractor. So that means they might be on for a specific project. Where it becomes ongoing, it becomes a little bit questionable. The control is quite important also. So how much direction are you giving that person to do the work? Are you prescriptively telling them you need to do X, Y, Z, or are they coming in with their own skill set, able to perform that work and deliver? So there are a few of those things. If they're able to delegate, that's another thing. If they're able to subcontract work, what sort of insurance is needed as well. So if you're in a situation where you've got a contractor, they should have their own insurance to cover them for their work, or they're traveling backwards and forwards, just insurance around how they're doing that work. And that ties
So Vivian,
yeah.
with respect to insurances, just really, really quickly, what sorts of insurances should people be looking for to have if you're, let's say, a contractor, consultant, accountant, graphic designer? Are there specific insurance types that they should at least look into and consider if they require before becoming an independent contractor?
Yeah, absolutely. So the newer ones, so the professional indemnity is more traditional, but one of the newer ones for contractors that are doing things online, a lot of the content creation space, cyber fraud is something. I know professional services are targeted almost weekly in that space, with people trying to steal information online, but just being really diligent, making sure that you've got the online covered as well as the traditional, professional type of insurance that you'd need. Another good example of the online would be, so we mentioned the cyber fraud, but there's other peculiar types of insurance like online directory. There's a big trend these days with a lot of organizations partnering up and collaborating and linking various things on their websites and business lists. So online directory insurance is a newer type of insurance that a lot of brokers sell as well.
Okay. And just one other related question that popped in my head on that standpoint. What are there any considerations? Because now that we're doing a lot of work online, a lot of us, that means we're working across borders now. So it's not uncommon to be working on, I mean, I myself operate based in Australia, but I operate globally, doing a lot of work in Canada and the US. Are there things from a legal standpoint we need to be mindful of if you are working as an independent contractor, as a advisor, contractor, freelancer, and you're working across borders for clients uh, um, um, in other jurisdictions remotely? Are there any legal things that we should be considering when you're looking to engage the services of someone who might be a specialist, analyst, etc., residing in another international jurisdiction?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, Michael, because there are situations where you might be over here and you're working, say with California. I had another recent example of someone that did that, and they were also engaging contractors or who they thought were contractors in California, and there was a situation where those people said, no, well, we're actually not contractors because you're telling us what to do and you're spelling everything out. So they faced a sham contract claim over there. So I think one of the things to be mindful of is not just where you're operating and the laws there, but the laws of the other jurisdictions as much as you can. Another popular question I get asked around that is around the if I have a clause in my contract that says Californian law applies or Australian law applies, is that enforceable? And it never is a guarantee that that particular law will apply that you have in that clause, but it is an idea of the intention of the parties. But it's always good to turn your mind to how the law might deem either an employee or a contractor overseas.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Great insights, Vivian. Thank you. So the second trend, like us to have a bit of a talk about our strategic our collaborations. I think given the heavy, strong focus around expansion and growth of businesses, and even for those starting new businesses, engaging in collaborating with other businesses, I think is a great way to really spearhead and advance the progress you're making, whether you're trying to enter a new market, you're setting up a new business, you're trying to scale and grow the company, acquiring more customers. And there's a variety of ways. From a business standpoint, I think there are a variety of ways that people can, businesses, small, medium businesses can potentially be working with other organizations. So it can be about working with some of your customers to create, products, services, and solutions. I have a technology technology company that was working with one of their key clients in the grocery retail space to create some knowledge management and analytics capability and solution. So they were working with this particular grocery retailer to create a very tailored solution, and work quite closely with them. And then the benefit of that was obviously meeting the needs of the client on such a big engagement, but it also provided that technology company, my client, the opportunity for them to take those learnings and to apply it and use that to create other products and service offerings catering to other industries and geographic markets. So there's a whole creation of products and solutions. That's one element, but it doesn't even have to be collaborating on such a level such as that. Other opportunities very much around from a marketing standpoint. There are a lot of opportunities in terms of can be co-marketing in terms of you might do things like events, workshops, seminars, doing live streams, such as what we're doing here, creating content which enables us to get access to visibility, to deliver value to a combined audience, a large audience. Doing the likes of podcasting, and where you're inviting on some of your suppliers, some of your clients, other service providers, working with it and having them on as guests, where you can then both share that content, that live stream video, that podcast interview. They can share it through their email customer database, their personal networks, their social media channels. Excuse me. So there's lots of excuse me, sorry. there's lots of opportunities to do so in terms of, from a marketing perspective. Research is another area which I've seen companies collaborate to do a big market research study. I had a client, at large education organization, and they partnered with one of their other IT providers to do a large study looking at a particular industry segment, and then from using the learnings of that to create articles, to conduct workshops, breakfast forums, and so using that joint research initiative. So that's another example. And then, of course, there is also then partnerships where you're collaborating and you have a formal partnership where, for example, you might have, let's say, a marketing agency which is now going to formally join forces and align themselves and enter into a formal partnership, let's say with a strategy consulting firm or an IT firm. Vivian, it would be great for you if you could enlighten the viewers, the listeners, as to what are some of the things to be thinking about, both in the context of when you're collaborating, let's say just when you're collaborating in these different kinds of ways. So be it if you're collaborating to create a product and solution that you want to take to market, versus, and even with the likes of creating content, doing joint marketing things. What are some of the legal things we need to be mindful of? If you could touch on perhaps both when you're engaging in formal partnerships, I'm sure there are a lot of considerations, but I think for the majority of small, medium-sized businesses, they're really going to be thinking about some of these other ways in terms of maybe co-creating product and services, doing joint marketing efforts, maybe joint research efforts as a form of marketing again. What are some of the things should we be thinking about, even though they're not legal actual partnerships, but nonetheless, you're working with other organizations to undertake these commercial objectives? What are some of the things that we still need to be mindful of, even though it's not a formal, necessarily legal collaboration per se?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail right on the head. You've got a spectrum. You have the informal, so the times where you might collaborate on some things without having anything formally written down in agreement. And then you have on the other end of the spectrum, you have got your joint ventures, your partnership agreements and things like that. So IP is a big one, I would say. So just how the IP is going to be used, if it's co-owned or if it's going to be a situation where one party that potentially has contributed more sweat potentially has the ownership and they're licensing it. So I think it's just being really clear about those things and the expectations around them. Reputation is one of those things that I've seen come up, quite a bit in employment and business law type cases. So if you're collaborating with an organisation that may be potentially, or a partner that might be a little bit risque in how they're sort of talking about various topics, could be controversial things or just controversial industries, just to be really mindful of what the ground rules are exactly. And also I think that, and I think this is potentially a non-legal thing, but I think it's important to consider on the legal side also, is really just making sure that there is that alignment so that you don't have trouble if there is a situation of enforcing or having to say, oh, look, things haven't gone right. How are we going to part ways? So making sure that, you don't just rely on a handshake. You might need to formalize some things, potentially as spend starts to go up or as more time goes into something. And really, when you're looking at that monetization, that's potentially where you want to get some agreements in place just to really demarcate, what are the IP ownership, what's the confidentiality around here, how are we going to share resources? Do we have employees or contractors that are going to be split between projects, etc., and how are we going to manage that cost and the legality of it? Which entity or which organization is going to hire those resources? So those are some of the things, and I know that it varies from small scale to big scale, but that's just sort of a happy medium of what you'd consider between both small and large.
Okay, some great insights there, Vivian. Thank you. So would it be fair to say then that in terms of when it might be necessary to perhaps do some more investigation, perhaps coming to speak to a legal expert such as yourself, that particularly when we're starting to get into initiatives that involve significant investment of money, or there's really issues around IP and ownership. So for example, if you're doing that big research study, you're writing a book, so some of those more substantive monetary investment or significant IP matters projects, would it be fair to say it's in those kinds of instances that it might be worthwhile to engage in some legal consultation in terms of making sure the necessary considerations and things are covered off? Is that fair to say? Or do we need to even consider, so if someone's looking to, have a podcast host, someone on a guest on their podcast. I'm just trying to just kind of ascertain when is it that, really taking a closer, sterner look at kind of what's kind of a general kind of tipping point that you really need to kind of dial in and look into this a bit more closely.
Yeah, look, the cliche response depends on the situation, but I can clearly say that there's two scenarios that come to mind quite neatly. If you're talking about inventing things, so more along the lines of new things that you're just bringing to market, at that particular point, it's important to get advice early on from someone that in the intellectual law property space, because in that instance, if you start to make public announcements, you could lose things like rights to patents and things like that. On the other end of the spectrum around the content creation, so we might be creating content and putting things out there, you might want to have that agreement before things start to get formalized. So where if it might be just a test scenario, you might be trialing how a collaboration would go with another content creator, you might not necessarily formalize then, but if you are looking to have a longer term view of the relationship or monetize that content, that's potentially where you might have some friction with the other party if they don't have the same view, or if potentially they don't want to brand themselves with that particular content as being what they do for their bread and butter 5 days a week or 7 days a week. So those are things to consider. And when you're talking to a lawyer, you'd be talking about things like potentially IP assignment. So if there was IP created before a formalized agreement, you might have by a particular party or combination of, you might be looking at a scenario where that intellectual property needs to be assigned. So if, for example, you've got two content creators, they decide to set up a company and formalize things, you might want to do that. So have that IP assignment occur from those two individuals to that formal entity. So those are the sorts of things. And then, just really having a good understanding of the IP and how it's going to be dealt with and monetized and used, what's okay and what's not okay.
Okay, great. Some great insights, some great tips there, Vivian. So really appreciate that. Okay, so moving on to our third trend area, I want to talk about is systemization and automation. And so this is an area I think that represents a lot of opportunities for our small and medium-sized businesses. I think there's been a lot of examination by some of the larger research and larger organizations, the likes of Salesforce, for example, and other research firms have done a lot of investigating as to where are we as small, medium-sized businesses in the world of process system and processing. And that's an area that definitely has a lot of opportunity. It definitely has been shown as an area with respect to companies that are looking to scale and grow that they really need to focus in on, because having those repeatable systems and processes are quite critical from a marketing and sales perspective, because you want to be able to have repeatable processes to allow you to expand, build, and grow, but also in terms of higher productivity as well. So I think some of the areas that I think small, medium businesses really need to be looking at is within their marketing and sales, what are the processes they have with respect to lead capture, lead generation, having the right kinds of processes and repeatable systems to enable them to drive the sales and growth. But there are also other areas that they should be considering looking at, areas such as around reporting and analytics, because gaining a more in-depth understanding of your markets, of your customers is quite critical. And there's been a lot studies that have been showing that really those high growth firms, those high growth organizations who are really getting the scale and growth that we're seeing, that we're hearing about, having robust systems, processes in place, utilizing more sophisticated systems around analytics, collaboration is really going to be important. So this is definitely some areas that I think small, medium-sized businesses need to be thinking about as part of how they're going to be able to, entering a new business, taking your business to the next level. With that being said, though, Vivian, when we talk about systems, processes, and we're trying to drive growth and going into new markets, getting more customers, and as there's getting more larger volumes of customers, a larger business organization, more complexity. What are some key things if we're thinking about systems, processes, as we expand out? What are some things that we need to be thinking about from a legal perspective in terms of be it customer data, internal data, processes, what have you? Can you tell us this from a legal standpoint? What are some of the things we need to think about?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great.
Privacy policies and things like that are the norm when you're dealing with websites. But yeah, just in terms of having a privacy policy generally, of how the information is being collected. So letting your clients, your customers know that and where it's going. So one of the common situations is a lot of hosting services that are run overseas, and then clients wanting to know where their information is going. I know in the legal industry it's quite strict. So if you have information that is going overseas, you really need to be clear on what sort of security exists to protect that information. And in some instances it's quite frowned upon. But yeah, these days there are a lot of CRM. There is a lot of other software and a lot of other ways where information can be transmitted. I think one of the key things as well is just making sure that the data can be easily extracted, in particular if you are changing or and where and who owns that data. Is there a situation where that organization is reputable and credible, is scrapping data after customers leave, or are they leaving things in the cloud and exposing clients and customers to risk? So I think it's we sort of go, oh yeah, big organization, big CRM there, I think they'll do the right thing. But I think it's just being careful and reading those boring terms and conditions, and the licensing agreements and all of that stuff before you do start to use some of those systems. And same thing with the automation. You might be thinking of virtual assistants or all sorts of other arrangements to make your life easier, which is great. You just have to make sure that there are agreements in place with those third parties to say this is how the information can be used, and this is confidential, and we don't allow you to use the information in XYZ other ways. I think it's important where you've got, in the entrepreneurial space, you've got people that are sort of thinking, okay, well, how can I use a list? How can I use this for my game? So I think it's just important to be very clear on what can be done with things like customer lists and emails and things like that.
Yeah. A couple of great points that you've touched on that I kind of would like to delve in just a little bit, Vivian, because I think these are quite important. So with respect to VAs, because VAs I think is something that many, in terms of some of the immediate ways of processing, systemizing, outsourcing, that's going to be one of the immediate things many small, medium-sized businesses are going to be looking at. So in terms of the virtual assistants, is it confidentiality agreements? And then again, I'm going to be bringing up this cross-border because a lot of work is done digitally now. And it's also become fairly common and well known that for us, for example, in where we're located, the likes of the Philippines, for example, you can access a lot of great virtual assistants out of the Asian markets. For those, again, so in terms of, virtual assistants, and if you're going to be sourcing some of these resources overseas, any particular watches you mentioned, confidentiality agreements, any other quick watch outs or must-dos as part of a business owner's investigation?
Yeah,
looking on the likes of
absolutely. Yeah, look, I'd say in the first instance, it's important to have confidentiality agreements. So a lot of people call them NDAs, but a really important distinction some people miss is there's a difference between a confidentiality deed and a confidentiality agreement. confidentiality deed traditionally does need to be signed in wet ink for it to be enforceable. But you'd use a deed where there's no money changing hands just yet. So, and that's this. It's a bit of a pain, but it is that way. It is wet ink that you need for a deed. Whereas with an agreement, that's typically used where there is money changing hands. So you'd have an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, and that can be signed digitally. That can be used that way. But I would say those are the bare minimums: an NDA or confidentiality deed if there isn't money changing hands, as well as a contract or agreement, just to spell out. And that's okay if those organisations in Philippines, etc. And there are a lot of businesses that do round up those VAs in the Philippines or anywhere else. If they have their agreements, that's great. But then also, if you've got a particular idea of how information should be handled, then you need to have your agreements in place as well. So it's okay to sign theirs, and then you can have them sign yours if that allows you to have your coverage. Yeah.
Fantastic. That's great. And then just another point I'd like to touch on quickly is with regards to custom list, because email marketing campaigns, email marketing is a key, strategic, a key marketing tactic that lots of SMEs are undertaking, and again, often they are also going across jurisdictions. Any watch outs with regard to that? Because I know, just from my own experiences in some of the email marketing that I've done for myself, I'm working with other clients. Different jurisdictions can have different rules with regards to privacy, and there have been in certain jurisdictions some rules around marketing lists and those things. So just maybe one or two quick final tips with regards to email lists and how to be using that and what to be mindful of, particularly if you're going to be dealing across international boundaries.
It does add a layer of complexity because then you're then required to look at what applies in those jurisdictions. But what I can say is if there's a particular market that you're targeting, take the time to understand what the rules are. So in Australia, we do have the Privacy Act, we've got spam regulations, and those are important to be across. And then also giving people the opportunity to opt out of communications, I think is important wherever you are. And also just if you haven't got consent, don't assume you have consent and then wait for people to complain and hit the report spam on their email provider. Actually make sure that they've opted in. And I think that that's a very key point, because the other alternative is, someone just made an inquiry on the website or they are a client, I'll just assume that they do want to be on the list. So I think that that's something to be quite mindful of. And then always having at the bottom that option to unsubscribe. I can't tell you, I mean, I'm sure you're the same, Michael, you get the emails that say, if you don't want to receive anything, just reply to this email. I don't want to reply to the email, I just want a little unsubscribe at the bottom. So those are things to watch out for.
Okay, so making sure we provide provisions to opt in as well as for to allow people to opt out, very important. Well, Vivian, thank you very much. I think this has been a great live stream discussion in terms of these 3 key trends around talent acquisition, collaborating, opportunities to collaborate, as well as automation and systemization. So Vivian, for folks that want to get more information with regards to some of the legal considerations as they're looking to build, expand, grow their business, whereabouts is the best place to reach, get in touch with you?
Yeah, absolutely. The website's the best place, so michaellawgroup.com.au, and there's a few useful articles on there, and that list is growing by the day. So definitely check in there, and you can contact us on there if you want to get further information.
Fantastic. So that's michaellawgroup.com.au, folks. The website is in the chat notes. And for those of you that are looking for some insights, advice, recommendations in terms of some of your business growth objectives, in terms of how to build and grow your business, the industries, markets you should be focusing on, what are the appropriate strategies to take your business forward, you can please visit my website, listeninnovategrow.com. I'm Michael Haynes, and on behalf of Vivian, thank you very much, and look forward to seeing you again soon on the next joint live stream. Until then, take care, stay safe, and happy holiday season.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Vivian.